On September 11, 2025, Bethan Hardison, activist, asked Yara Shahidi, activist, in a Forbes interview on how she felt about her world right now. Yara answered honestly by saying she is terrified and would like a plan to fix it. I empathize, in that no one should live in fear. In my opinion, this sounds like a plea for help. I would like to help, but how? When Yara Shahidi was younger, she did an equality speech on October 19, 2018 at the Gleason Respect Awards. I argue this speech is a hypothesis to fix her world and reduce her fear. In April 2024, I published my book on Amazon based on this hypothesis, showing that prevention will lead to equity and that equity will lead to equality. This hypothesis will fix the political, economic, and social problems in our world. This nonprofit, non-edited channel is a letter to Yara Shahidi in teaching Yara's hypothesis to the public in order to better our world. In the end, Yara Shahidi will get the Nobel Peace Prize for her hypothesis. Dear Yara Shahidi. Chapter 13, Individual Education. As the racism experts pointed out earlier, racism can be unlearned, and kids will be racist unless parents actively teach kids not to be. In the prefrontal cortex of an adult's brain, they experience functional fixedness, and that makes adults see everything exactly as is. This means that an adult will see a tennis racket exactly as is. With a child, they will see a broomstick as a javelin stick. The creativity of children is caused by their prefrontal cortex, which gives them the ability to be flexible and inventive. Kids have minds that are designed to learn, and adults have minds is designed to perform. This is why kids actually have the ability to be creative and learn new things. This is why teaching kids antiracism lessons when they are younger through different activities will help the child develop these new abilities through their new creativity lens. The argument here is that racism can be unlearned for adults and children, but children are a lot better at unlearning racism than adults are. Children's brains are like sponges that are more adaptable to learning that change when actively being taught to. As pointed out before, adults, on the other hand, are stubborn creatures and will stick to a behavior that they see as a right. Adults, on the other hand, are stubborn creatures and will stick to a behavior that they see as right for them, even if it is bad for society. To be fair to adults, there have been successes where people have gotten rid of their hate, as portrayed in the media, like a reformed KKK member or Nazi member, that are now making amends to teach others in their former group that hate is not the way. This reformed person can only get rid of their hate because they are willing to see the stress or damage that they are doing to themselves, their family, and their victims, if there were any. When these members finally see it or admit they have a problem, then the true change can happen. It is the same for an alcoholic, drug user, gambler, cheater, etc. Change can only happen when a person confronts their demons and then seeks the help that is needed to get them back to normal, so to speak, from a professional or organization that specializes in this sort of reform. This is a rigorous process for adults to unlearn racism, but it is possible. This is why teaching kids at a young age, from 2 years old to graduation, about anti-racism is needed, because then they will grow into adults with this same mindset. Now let's go the opposite way. What if you are an adult and you are comfortable being racist, or better yet, you are an adult who claims to be not racist, but says derogatory remarks about every race except yours? These two scenarios show a racist person or persons. Now let's imagine in the two scenarios above that this has been going on for generations without any interruption. In the racist expert's words, if the kids weren't taught from an active parent telling them not to be racist, then the child will end up racist. In other words, if the parent is racist, then the odds are that the children of these parents and parent will be racist too. In this scenario, this would be a cyclic loop or generational loop of continuous racism. This is the generational attitude of cohesion. For example, if my grandfather did it, my father did it, and then it is fine with me because it is fine with them. The template of racism never stops because racism is propaganda that grows like a cancer that feeds on fear and ignorance. It can spread to people to people, and then town to town, to where after generation or two it becomes a culture, a way of life, and then a proud history for their ancestors and a proud history for their ancestors that lived that way. Now the question is, how do you stop this generational racism? The answer is you start with children and their sponge-like brains to accept the 18 categories labeled before as the in-group of Leimana Plus with active learning. When the children grow up into adults, then they won't be racist towards these groups anymore. Now, if you can start with one generation and actually make it successful, then the next generations of humans will live Dr. King's dream of equality for all. This will end the generational racism that has been going on for centuries. Well, that was easy. I wonder if I can stop typing now or reading now. As mentioned before, there are a lot of facets to deter racism, but one approach that will start the process along is individual education. Individual education, in theory, is to be designed to help students learn more efficiently with their own learning style. With individual education, the student will be able to absorb the material the teacher is presenting and then apply it more conveniently without constant stress or frustrations that children using. With individual education, the student will be able to absorb the material the teacher is presenting and then apply it more conveniently without constant stress or frustrations that children usually feel with school today. With individual education, children to adults will become advocates with their own retained learning style by applying it to the real world, then in a job, because it is how they obtained and learned the information given to them in school. Individual education starts with the Individual Education Plan, or IEP. The IEP is a plan designed for a student with an identified disability who attends school. The student is given special instruction within special education or gifted education. For example, if a student has ADHD, then the IEP for that student will be for that student to drink coffee. Then the IEP for that student will be for that student to drink coffee to calm that student down or bounce on a ball if they feel hyper. Once the student calms down from being hyper by bouncing away their overabundance of energy, then the teaching can resume with a slightly less energetic or slightly tired student. The IEP is designed for students in special education and gifted education and not for average students. Why? In individual education, I argue that the IEP should be used for all students in education. No one is a perfect student, and that every student needs to understand how they learn and to be advocates for themselves in their lifelong education practices. Plus, the IEP incorporates the special education teacher or gifted education teacher, the homeroom teacher, a doctor, a psychiatrist, the vice principal, and the principal, if needed, the parents or guardians, and the students. All of these education specialists gather together to discuss or advocate the best possible action or course for the student to take. All these education specialists gather together to discuss or advocate the best possible action or course for the student to take to be more successful in their education venture. As they say, it takes a village to raise a child. In this case, if every student had an education specialist team on their side, like a team of specialist doctors diagnosing a patient, then literally no child will be left behind. Now, for students to understand how they learn, students are assessed with standardized tests to determine their strengths and weaknesses. The earlier these students are assessed, then the accommodations that they are given will determine the better off their education overall will be in their lifetime. For example, if a student had three learning styles such as visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning, and they used their learning styles for the subject like geometry, then the teacher teaching geometry would visually write examples on the board on how to use sine and cosine on right degree triangles to find the sides or angles of that triangle. This is the visual learning style. After that, the teacher would orally and slowly explain in detail with math the most proficient way to get the answer. This is the auditory learning style. Lastly, the teacher would have the student attempt an example by themselves and then have them measure the sides and angles of a cut out right triangle to have the student get a hands-on approach. This is the kinesthetic learning style. In this way, the teacher has accommodated their classroom and modified their instruction to help the student not only get excited about learning, but be motivated in understanding hard, abstract concepts in a relatable way. In this regard, students not only relate to the teacher better with their instruction, but can absorb and regurgitate the information taught with ease thanks to the IEP. Learning styles in education are theory-based, and the research behind learning styles is still inconclusive. I'm using them here as an example because most people are familiar with them, and I was also taught them in both my master and PhD programs. The example I provided above was based on a student I tutored to help him understand geometry more with the education I received in learning styles. The science evidence shows that learning styles, like visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, are not an inherent trait humans have. The science evidence does show that students are a combination of different learning styles, especially visual. For example, the research shows that auditory and visual learners remembered a list of words better if they saw the list of words in print than being told the words. The visual perspective was more profound for students who declare themselves exclusive auditory learners. Other research shows that chemistry and physics students learn much better and improved on tests when they were given visual aids or pictures instead of reading the text of the book alone. The advocate I would like a student to learn, advocacy, thank you, jeez. The advocacy I would like a student to learn in the IEP will be scientifically researched in having them understand their combination of learning styles, especially visual. This will help them learn and use what they obtained in their education, then they can apply it to their job and then their life. This is the individual education. Now, when it comes to teaching adults learn through association. This means that if a classroom is full of plumbers and the teacher is teaching poetry, then the learning style is kinesthetic because plumbers usually work with their hands. Plus, the instruction examples have to use plumbing terminology so that the students can understand and relate to the examples better. As for children, there are no unified theories that accommodate all children's learning styles as with adults. I argue that the best way to teach children is through association and play. Children have similar learning styles like adults, but they also learn through play. The instruction has to be associated on what they like to... The instruction has to be associated on what they like to induce... I'm not saying this right. The instruction has to be associated on what the children like to induce motivation and creative thinking. For example, if a child is into Power Rangers, then the teacher has to modify the instruction for math by using Power Ranger stickers. Okay, let's try this. For example, if a child is into Power Rangers, then the teacher has to modify their instruction for math for adding by using Power Ranger stickers. This is the visual learning style. Plus, stickers will keep costs down instead of buying action figures. Next, explain orally if I have 3 Power Rangers and I need 2 Power Rangers to stop Lord Zed and his minions, so how many Power Rangers do I have? If the student gets the answer right, then have the student run back and forth across the room with all 5 Power Rangers to stop Lord Zed. Not only will the student understand this abstract concept through play and hands-on instruction, but the student will be motivated later because in the student's mind, they are part of the adventure in helping the Power Rangers and stopping the bad guy. In this way, they were part of the story and they became a good guy in the end with their adventures. I'm not sure how it is in the other parts of the U.S., but here in Southern Oregon, teachers get a lot of concepts on how to teach through the University of Oregon. From there, 2 concepts usually go back and forth in research like a pendulum, and they are repetition and thinking, like doing projects. I would argue do both. As mentioned before, if a teacher was teaching geometry, then they would use visual and auditory learning styles to deduce repetition. Once that is mastered, then kinesthetic instruction can be used in the project. As before, sines and cosines could be used to determine sides and angles of right triangles for mastering repetition. As a project, students could go to the lumber yard and calculate the angles and sides of rafters needed for a house. In this way, the students would get both instructional purposes and use all the learning styles as well too. This too will be explained in more detail later. In the end, students will learn more clearly with individual education because it helps them to get to know themselves better and how they learn. Once they learn on what works for them, then they can become advocates for their lifetime education in school and in business. They will help students absorb the notion of antiracism much easier in order to form an equality for all society in the future. Ich ni san shi go, kuju, konnichiwa, lalun, oui, hola, buenos dias, adios, we all win together, de nada.